Okay, let me continue with this. If I want to do a stratification, I could divide my gender of my people into male and female. I could choose to pick 20 at random females from the list of females, and I could get a simple random sample of 20 males. Now, I may want to do it by race. I may want to look at the ethnicity and divide them up. And because we don't have equal categories of ethnicity, maybe I might have 90% of my sample chosen from one group and 10% from another group. I don't necessarily have to select the same proportion from each group, particularly if they're not represented in an equal way. Say I had 2 times as many males as I did females, then it would be kind of silly to sample the same number of males and females to get information. Now, here are some other terms that we want to look at. That anytime we do sampling, we can have some problems when we sample. And one problem is we can have undercoverage, that we select our people or whatever our sample is dealing with, and we leave out certain people. That will happen if we say, pick our friends. We're going to undercover many people who have differences from us. If we use people who have cell phones and we use phone numbers in order to collect data, we're going to leave out people that don't have cell phones. We also have a problem with non-response. An individual is chosen for the sample, but you can't contact them or the person refuses to respond. So a lot of times I might get a phone call from, and I'd say it's an organization that's trying to do some type of a political poll, and they'll want my response because I've been selected out of some group. And I hate to say it, but I will often just hang up the phone because I don't want to give out personal information over the phone, whether it be political or whether it be economic and so on. So I'm often a non-responder. Uh, Another thing that can happen is we can have response bias. We can have people who are responding and they don't respond truthfully. You can have people that you want to say in kind of in a funny term, they want to toy with people. So maybe they're getting a phone call and they're part of some study and they are overtly untruthful about the responses just because they think it's funny. Or maybe they don't want to respond and answer a question. Maybe they're asked something about have you smoked marijuana and they think, well, I don't want anybody to know I have, so they say no, but they actually have. So we have a lot of times that people will respond and have some bias in their responses. Now, another problem is the way the question is just worded. We can have questions that have wording that will taint our answers, that will cause people, just because of the way the question is worded, to respond one way. For instance, if we say something like, how do you feel about welfare? Do you think that it's okay for people to be on welfare? And quite often that word welfare has a negative connotation, and so people will respond to it in a negative fashion. On the other hand, if you worded, how do you feel about giving aid to the poor? People may respond differently to that just because of the way the question's worded. So we have to be very careful about the way questions are worded when we set up a survey. We also have an issue with interviewer bias, somewhat similar to response bias, but this is now where the interviewer, the person who's doing the interviewing, causes you to have a biased response. It causes some type of a bias just by the interviewee asking the question. Now, here's just a small example, and again, you can look in the book to see some other examples. But here's if I had a newspaper advertisement for U.S. Today, and this is several years ago. But should handgun control be tougher? You can call the shots in a special call-in poll tonight. If yes, call this number. If no, call this number. Now, it says charges of 50 cents for the first minute for this particular phone call, because anytime it's if it's an 800 number, you wouldn't be charged for it, but some of these other 900 and some other area codes will actually have a charge to your phone. Now, who's going to call up? Well, I certainly am not going to call up. I'm too cheap to pay the 50 cents to put this in because I'm not that concerned with this issue that I'm going to adamantly call and say yes or no about this. But quite often, when you have some type of a gun control issue or truthfully any type of topic, the people who are going to call in are either people who are very adamantly for something or adamantly opposed to something. So this would be an opinion poll, would be having this voluntary response bias. Okay, and we might be able to justify some other types of bias too. Maybe we could say the wording of the question maybe could elicit certain responses. So sometimes it's not just one answer to what bias is represented. And again, you can look in the book for some other little examples as well. Now, anytime we're trying to find some inference or some conclusion about our population, really we like to have the entire set of the population. But if we can't have the whole population, we want large samples that have been collected in a way where we don't have bias. So we have to be careful about all those problem with sampling issues, and that will give us our best shot at having some credible data.